And we're going to start over in Piscal. So we're going to start by making our art for our tiles. And I'm going to make a few different types. One type is kind of like just background scenery, so just like blocks of color, essentially. Another type is like platforms, where I'm going to kind of use to design the level. And then the final type is like scenery elements that I might place in different places, like clouds or trees or things like that. You can make these as separate files or as one file. It doesn't really matter that much which way you do it. It's kind of up to your preference, however is easiest to organize for you. One thing that we have to be very careful about is making sure the size of our art matches the size that we use when we create the tile map. So I'll go over that as we're filling it. So I'm going to go with the default 32 by 32. But you might, depending on what your design and art looks like, you may want to use something larger or even something smaller. But you just want to make sure the art does have to be square. At least, I don't know if it really has to be square, but it's going to be way easier if it's square. So you definitely want it to be, if not 32 by 32, something that is square, so the same width and height. Usually you want something that uses those powers of 2 that we talked about last time. So like 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, etc. So I'm just going to use the defaults. And for my first, thank you. For my first few sprites or frames, that's okay. I'm just going to use some pretty big blocky colors that I'm just going to use as kind of my background. Okay, we might have to leave it open.
You gave it like open a little bit.
Yeah, maybe, or we could see if he's still going. Okay, let's just leave it open then.
Go safety. You want to just keep it propped for now, and then
Yeah.
I don't know if they're gonna coming back or not, because the big cart is still there. But
Oh, really?
yeah.
Yeah, just use the thing, and we can deal with it if we need to. Thank you.
Whatever works for you.
Okay, so I'm gonna start out with some just like basic colors. Maybe I'll add a little texture. So I'm gonna get like a color for the sky. Something like that would look good. And then another tool, I don't know if I've talked about this before, but one tool that is really useful in Pascal is this lighten darken tool. It basically just like either lightens, or if you're holding command, will darken the color. And if you hold shift, it'll just do it once. So you can kind of create little like highlights very easily if you want to create a little texture. And so if we want like, I'm not going to make a ton, but you might want to make like a couple frames for the sky. So I'm going to use the bucket and fill it in, and then use the lighten darken tool and just add some little highlights. So yeah, that's a nice way to add just like a little bit of texture. I'm gonna add something for like maybe some grass. So maybe I'll choose like a green color, and then fill that in, and maybe add like some little grassy thingies. So I'll just like draw some little pieces of grass like that. Something like that might be good. I'm kind of going through these quickly. These are just kind of like background tiles. We'll see how we're going to use these in a little bit. You could also just use like block colors for this. Or you could, it kind of depends on what the orientation of your game is. Anyway, let's do like a dirt one. I'm gonna do like a brown color, something like that. And I'll do the same thing. I'm gonna turn the onion skin off for a second. And I'll just add some like little dirt patches in here. Okay, so these are just like solid color tiles. These are useful to apply to like a background essentially, or like a large area. So that's one type of thing that we can use our tile set for. There's other way to do backgrounds as well, but this, since we're doing tile maps today, this we'll add some in like this. So then I'm going to create some frames that are going to be my platforms. And so for my platforms, again, this is just it's sort of simple stylistic choice that I'm going to make. You guys can do different things, but for my platform, what I'm going to do is use my my dirt color, and then I'm going to draw some grass on top. So I'll take the green color and just fill in like these top pixels here. So that'll give sort of like an orientation to it. And then again, I can use the lighten darken tool, and this will let me add some little, you know, little areas of texture to make it look a little bit more interesting. And then I can do that with the grass as well. So I can add some stuff up here. So that'll be like sort of the top of the platform. And then you don't really have to do this, but if you want to start shaping out platforms and having a little bit more detail, I'm going to make a couple more. So for like the sides, so I'll do the same kind of process. I'll fill this in, and then I'll grab the green color and just draw down the side like that. And you don't have to be, I mean, you can, you know, basically you can apply your own aesthetic to this, but I'm just drawing some simple stuff. So then I'll use the lighten and darken tool and just add some little areas of texture around again, just to keep it consistent, and some little grass areas. And then I'm gonna add another one for the other side. It might be easier actually if I just fill in a few of these first. I'll just fill in a few, or I'll just duplicate a few of these. So I've got top, I've got right, let's do left. Okay, and then I'll do lighten and darken, add some little textures in. Just trying to add a little bit of visual interest. I'm not, you know, I'm going pretty fast with this. And then I might want to add some corners. You don't have to add corners, but I think this will be a good way to demonstrate something about how the physics in Godot works. So if I imagine like I want something that kind of connects this side to this side, I might want like a little edge or something. Trying to think. I should have drawn this out. Actually, I should have drawn out how I want this to look. Maybe I can still do that. Let's switch to okay, so I want like a little platform like that, and I want little corners. Yeah, so I'm just gonna draw like a little corner like that. That's what I'll do. Okay, that'll be easy. Okay, it's good to plan stuff out. All right, so so I'll do like a right corner and a left corner. So for this one, I'll get a green pencil, and I'll kind of go like this, and then kind of draw on the side like this, and maybe I'll just erase the corner up here. Like that. Trying to think how that's gonna look. For some reason my key command is not working. Okay, so I want like a little corner like that. Okay, so I need both directions. My key commands are not working. I think one of my plugins got messed up by a new iOS. Anyway, let's just draw that right there. And then we'll do the opposite over here. So I'll draw like that, and then I'll go over the corner here and go down. I'm just gonna erase this edge a little bit. Okay, I think this will be good enough to get started. Let's draw in a little bit of texture in here. Okay. I might be missing some, but I can always come back and edit this later if I need to. Okay. Drawing a little bit of texture in here. Okay. So this will be good to get us started. And I'm going to add a couple extra brown areas in case I need some more of these. I'll just add a few of them. And then the last type of stuff that I'm going to add in here are like scenery things. So for example, if I want like a little cloud, I might get like a very, very light blue color and draw like a little cloud. And maybe I'll make a couple of those and just fill those in. And so we're gonna layer these on top of some of the other windows. So I'll do another cloud. And then I might want like, you know, some trees or maybe some flowers or something fun to include. So let's make a little tree. And this one, actually, we want to make sure to like take up a whole tile. It sort of depends on the style of the game that you're making, but let's just make a little tree like that. And actually, let's use a darker green so it stands out a little bit. Okay. Okay. And maybe we'll make like a little flower. So maybe we have like a nice green stem and a couple leaves, and then maybe like a pink, some pink petals like that. Okay. That looks kind of nice. We can like throw this somewhere. We can always come back and edit these if we need to. So again, we have some like basic solid tiles. We have some platform tiles that we're gonna put together and use. And I have a bunch of blank tiles because I'm pretty sure I forgot some, so we'll come back later. We've got some clouds, we've got a tree, we've got a flower. Actually, I want some like water. That's the other tile that I want. Let's duplicate this one and just make it darker. So I'll just make a darker color and fill that in. And that'll be our water. Okay. And I'm gonna change, actually, I'll draw some little waves. Okay. All right, so we've got our sprite sheet. I'm gonna save it first. So I'm gonna save this as tiles and save as Pascal. And so I want to save that file. So that'll go into my downloads folder. And so I want to put that in my art folder. So it's not part of the game, but I have a copy of it if I need to get it back later. And then I'm going to export my sprite sheet. So when you export, make sure to scale at the right size. So I'm doing 32 by 32 pixels. I want to scale it at 1.0x to make sure that it's not too large. And then we're going to export it as a PNG. And so this is going to create one image that has all of our tiles in it. And we're going to use Godot to break them up and use them as separate tiles. So here's my tiles. And I want to put this in my game under sprites. So one thing that you do have to be careful about when you create a tile sheet is we have this image, and that has the tiles that we're going to start with, but you may want to add more tiles to your game later on. You can change that image, but the thing you have to be careful about is when we add the tile maps in Godot, we're going to cut them up, and it's going to make basically a map where the tiles are. And so when you export the tiles, you can actually choose the number of columns and rows. And depending on how many tiles or frames you have in Piskel, it'll just choose what it thinks is the best number. But once you sort of export it the first time, whatever that number of columns is, you always have to keep that the same. And you have to keep your art in order. So you can always add more at the end, but if I change the order of some of these tiles, it's gonna change how it renders in Godot. So once you export something and start using it, you have to be very careful about how you make modifications to it. So hopefully we may make some modifications, and we'll come back here and go over what that would look like. But for now, we're gonna go over to Godot and set up our tile map. So if we look over in our sprites, we can see that I now have this tiles.png. And so that's what we're going to use for our tile map. To get started, I'm going to go to my main node for my level 1. And I'm going to add a just regular node 2D, which is going to be the parent node for all of my tile maps. So I'm going to hit the plus button and get a node 2D and click create. And I'm just going to call this tiles. And I'm going to lock this so it stays in place. And then in here, I'm going to add all my tile maps so they're nice and organized. So I'm going to hit plus again, and then I'm going to type in tile. And you can see two things come up when I type tile. One of them is the old version of the tile map. The more recent version of Godot introduced this new tile map layer, which is a little bit easier to use. The old version of the tile map will still work, and if you go on YouTube and stuff, most of the tutorials are for this version of the tile map. They've actually made a lot of changes to these, it's a completely new system than it was even just a year ago. So a lot of the tutorials you'll find will be using old versions of this, so that's just something to kind of watch out for. If you're looking at something on YouTube or online that's older than 6 months or a year, it may be using different versions of some of the nodes. Anyway, we're going to use a tile map layer. So we're going to create our first tile map layer. And the tile map layer is going to bring up one of our editors down here. And there's a lot of components to editing a tile map. We're just going to go over some of the basics. So to edit a tile map, we need a tile set. A tile set basically is the thing that kind of chops up the tiles. And what we're going to do is we're going to create one tile set, and then we're going to copy and basically make copies of it so that we don't have to do this more than once. It doesn't really take that long to do, but you'll see. So for my tile set, I'm just going to click new tile set. And when I click on here, there's a few different things, there's a physics area, there's a visibility area, there's a few different options like our regular nodes. But then if you click on the tile set itself, this opens even more options. And this is really important. This is the first thing that we have to change, is we need to match this tile size parameter to the size that we made our art in. So I made my art 32 by 32. So we have to make sure that this matches that. If you don't do that, it's not the end of the world. You just will start over. But you'll see when you start to edit the tile map and the tile set that they don't line up. And so you won't really be able to use it very easily. So that's the main thing that we have to change. We can close this now. And then we can start to add some tiles. So when you have the tile map layer selected, you can see it imposes this sort of orangey grid on top, which tells you which tile you're editing. And if you move your mouse around, you can actually see the coordinate at this bottom number here, shows you which coordinate you're editing. But we don't have any tiles yet, so down here we have to go to our tile set, and this is where we're gonna drag our art. So I'm gonna open up my sprites folder, I'm gonna drag this guy in here. And it says, would you like to automatically create tiles in the atlas? For a tile set like the one we created, where everything is square and basically pretty simple, this is an easy yes. We can just say yes, and it'll do it pretty easily, and we don't have to do it ourselves. So that's a good thing. If you have a more complex tile set, you might want to do this on your own, but we're not going to do that right now. So I'm just going to click yes. And you'll see that it's going to add little orange boxes around all of our tiles. And I can select each one of the tiles. And if the boxes don't match the art, that's your sign that you did not set the tile size correctly. So if your boxes don't match your art, if this doesn't line up, then you need to fix that. Okay, so let's start with, for our first layer, I'm gonna call this background. So I'm just gonna name this layer background, so I'll just remember what it's for. And I'm just gonna use these top 4 tiles. You can have more than 4, or also this like little dirt tile. It's kind of up to you what you want your backgrounds to look like. But to actually draw with the tiles, I can go to TileMap and just select a tile. And then if I want to make the whole top of this area, the sky. So if I click on a square, it'll add a tile there. And if I right click on it, it'll take it away. If I draw around like that, it'll just add a bunch of tiles. If I hold shift, it'll draw like a line of tiles. And if I hold command and shift, I can just fill in a whole big section with a bunch of this sky tiles. Okay, so then maybe below the sky, I'll have the ocean. I don't know exactly what my project is gonna look like, but we'll basically just create this little background. So this is just the background. Our player can't interact with this. It's just to kind of fill in the background, give it some texture. You can use, for your background, if you want more detail, you might want to add, you might want bigger tiles, or you might want more options for tiles. You can kind of play around with that. There's also options to have random tiles be added as you're drawing. If you click on this little dice button, it'll place a random tile. But you have to have the tiles selected. So if I select these two and then do a dice button, it'll do different ones. It's kind of hard to tell because they look basically the same, but you can see that they're changing. Anyway, there's a lot of other things that we can do here. You can make patterns, so you can make a block of tiles and repeat them. But we're just gonna kind of stop here for a moment and make our next layer. Okay. So I've got my background. So if I don't want to recreate my tile set, I can just duplicate this. Creating the tile set wasn't that much work because we just did it automatically. But if you have a different type of tile set, you might want to, duplicate it. So I'm just going to click on the background. I'm going to hit Command D. And I'm going to call this my platforms. And so this is what the player is actually going to be standing on and running into. If you're creating an RPG style game where the player can move in 4 directions, you still will want collisions for walls and things like that. For a platformer style game where the player is standing on a platform and running around and jumping, that's the style that we're going to do. So we're going to use physics for our platforms. So if we want to use physics, we have this platforms layer. We need to click on our tile set. And we need to add a physics layer. So a physics layer is basically just a layer of the tile set that will interact with the collider on the player. So our player has this little collider. It's this collision shape here. And so when we add a physics layer to our tile set, it will know when the two are colliding. And that's how we do basic collisions in this game engine. So for my physics layer, I just click Add Element. And then here's where we need to specify some different layers. I'll talk about this a little bit more next week, but to make our game engine run more smoothly, what we do is we set different layers for different parts of the game so that only things that need to interact with each other will look to interact with each other. So right now I don't have any layers. So I'm gonna go to the layer editor and we're just gonna add a couple layers and we'll do more of this next week. So my first layer, I'm just gonna call player. And my second layer, I'm gonna call platforms. So the player needs to interact with platforms. Platforms need to interact with the player. But some things may not have to interact with the platforms. They may only interact with the player. So we'll look at that more next week. So the default layer for everything is always 1. So I'm going to use that for the player because it's going to save us a little bit of time. But for my tiles, I'm going to change their layer to 2, which I've named platforms. So you can just click on these sort of little layer buttons, or you can, turn the player and platforms on and off. So we want the layer to be looking for our platforms, and we want the mask. The layer is what the thing is, what layer it's on. The mask is what it's looking for. So our tiles are going to be looking for our player. They're not going to be looking for themselves, so we don't need to turn on the platforms layer. If we click on the player real quick, you'll see that it has its own collision area. And so we can leave the player on that default number 1, and we can mask for platforms, turn off player. So that's how we should have it set up. I'll go over this a little bit more next week when we add some more objects. Anyway, back to our platforms layer. So now in our tile set, if we want there to be a collider, this is kind of the trickiest part of this whole thing. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on my tiles. So the art is sort of shown by the orange lines. It shows you where the art is. But to add a collider, we have to go over to this paint section. And we're going to paint what the property is. So we're going to select a property. And you can see down here is the physics layer 0. That's this physics layer that we added over here. So I'm going to select that. And then it makes this like little blue shape, which is the default physics layer. And this editor is a little bit challenging to use, but essentially, if I click on a tile, it adds that blue collision. So that blue square, the player will run into that. They won't be able to walk through that if they're looking for each other. So I'm just going to add the blue square here and here. But one thing to notice, so with these two guys, they have little corners. And so if we want to edit the default shape, we can, but it's a little tricky. So if I click on this, it's going to add a collider. If you don't want it to have a collider, you can change, actually you can't. How do you do that? You maybe right click. Maybe you click. Let's see. I'm actually not sure how you remove it. I'll have to look that up later. Maybe if I clear, okay, there we go. If I clear the whole collider and then click, it'll get rid of it. Okay, let's reset to default. And then I'm gonna click here, notice that it adds it. Now I can change the collider a little bit to match that. So I'm gonna drag one of these little diamonds over here, and then I'm gonna just add another one and just make a little corner right there. But notice that it hasn't changed on the actual tile set. I have to click this again, and then it'll update that. And then if I click on another one, like if I click over here, notice that it added that corner in there. That's not what I wanted, but I did want to select this so I can match it. I can also flip this, so I can flip horizontally, and now I have the edge over here. And then I'll click there, and now I'm good with that, and I'll just reset to default shape. So it's a little tricky. You kind of have to click back and forth, and it's not always exactly clear which click is going to do what. But if you play around with it a little bit, you will get used to it. Okay, so now we have some collider. Oh, and also I want this like dirt one to be a collider too. Okay, so now I can go to my tile map and actually draw a platform. So I'm gonna grab this like middle platform shape and draw it like that. And it looks like, oops. Okay. Oh, I need the, sorry, I had the wrong tool. Okay, I had this selection tool, but what I need is this little pencil tool. Okay, so I'm gonna draw, still not working. Okay, I'm gonna, oh, I have my background selected. Whoops. Okay, now I have my platform selected. There we go. So there's my little platform. I can draw like an edge like that. For a second I thought it had deleted the other one, but it didn't. It's just darker. I think, anyway. We'll see what it looks like. Then I can like draw these little lines down this way, like that. And then I can fill in the middle. And so I've got a little platform to start out on. I need to fix the edges a little bit. I should have brought this all the way to the side, but I can do that later. And let's just test and see if this works. I forgot to turn on gravity. So let's take our player and turn on use gravity. And now we'll be able to see if this works. Okay, so the player falls on the platform. And now we can see it jumping. For platform style, he's disappearing because I have Y sort on. So I need to remember to turn Y sort off. But now we have this little platform. And we can see he will fall off the edge. And so now we've got some basic physics going. Let's take our level and turn off Y sort. And so now our player is behind everything. So let's move our tiles up in the hierarchy. So we'll put our tiles back here and our player down here. And so now we see the player. He doesn't disappear. And now we need a jump animation, but we can add that later. And we've got our first tile. Okay, so we'll add the scenery tile, and then we'll break for workshop time. So one more layer. I'm going to take my platforms and duplicate this. And for this one, I'm just going to call this scenery. And so for this one, if I want to place some clouds around, I can do that. If I want like a little flower, I can add some flowers and some trees and just add a little bit of scenery to make the scene a little bit more interesting. And so there we go. So those are layered on top of the background. And, you can add, obviously, as many scenery elements as you want. The scenery doesn't have to be part of a tile map, but it does make it easier when you're editing because it's just going to be on a grid and you don't have to, like, move stuff around and line stuff up. And you can just add a bunch of stuff as you go. But, yeah, those are the basics. I'm going to stop here and give you guys some time to create the art and sort of get stuff set up. In the second part of class, we're going to go over a little bit more like actual level design concepts and start to build out the level a little bit, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to stop the recording here.